Good space time, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Citizen Web3 podcast, your source for educational insights into the Web3 universe and your connection hub to discovering those that contribute to building the decentralized world. Today, we are joined by Mayur Relekar from Arcana Network. We touch upon staying for the tech, philosophical ideas, and casinos. We discuss where is the money in Web3, business requirements, and making choices. Finally, we talk about user preferences, maintaining efficiency, and needs. If you enjoy our podcast, please share this episode to your favorite social platforms to help us spread Web3 values across the universe.
Got in for all the shit coins, but eventually stayed for the tech. You should be making choices purely based on business requirements, translating to technological, translating to what you need, where you want to build. We are probably living in an age where, we are learning that users care very little about the things we think they care about or we want them to care about. Over the years, I've basically seen it degenerate into just pure casino. And that's a little disheartening.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the Citizen Web3 podcast. I have with me Mayur, the CEO of Arcana Network today. Mayur, hi. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, so thanks for having me here today.
Yes, man. Very glad to have you. And I have a whole lot of questions. And as usually, traditionally, I'm going to start with kind of a boring one. But actually, it's not. It's a boring question, but actually it's the most exciting one in my opinion. Anyways, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, please, for myself, for the listeners. And if I can ask you, please, in the intro, to talk a little bit about your Web3 story. How did you get to Web3? And of course, how did you get to Arcana Network from there? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So like you said, I'm one of the founders. I'm CEO here at Arcana. I've been working in tech for like 20 years now. I started my journey way back in 2005, I think. And I've primarily been attracted to like software and software products in general, and primarily tried to work at the confluence of business, design, and tech. All three areas interested me, so I was more of a product guy from the get-go. And it was not until 2017 till I actually started getting into crypto. It was the time when like decentralized exchanges and centralized exchanges started to become commonplace in India, where I'm from, and also ICOs started to become quite the thing. And so I very obviously used my Indian rupees to get hold of some ETH, and then spent all of that ETH, which would have been worth a whole lot more today, on a whole bunch of shitty ICOs. But it was great. It was a great way to start and get in. I got in for all the shit coins, but eventually stayed for the tech. And it was abundantly clear to me at a very early stage once I started looking at things like Ethereum and every other sort of programmable smart contract blockchain, that this was the place where I wanted to spend the rest of my career, so to say. And I was extremely enamored by the ideals and the philosophies of crypto back in the day. And I'll still probably say that a lot of that is pretty much still intact, and I'd love to see that decentralized, middleman-less sort of future kind of pan out. But it's probably not going to be as idealistic as I had, or many of us had hoped for back in 2017, 2018. But hey, we're still here, still fighting the good fight, so to say. And it was in 2021 when we started Arcana. And the idea with Arcana was to basically play to mine and my co-founders and the small team that we had put together a strong suit, which was, how do you productize a lot of these things that we're talking about, right? We were dabbling with things like decentralized storage, and privacy preserving technology and all of these sorts of things. And how do you achieve it in a blockchain setting? It seemed like the best way to go about it. But then we started to realize that building consumer apps in Web3 is good. It's really, really hard. And there needed to be a way to be able to kind of abstract away the complexities so that people can focus just on building apps and rolling out features that people like consumers could tangibly end up using and in a very simple way. And so we sort of doubled down on that use case and said, let's try and do something here. And that's sort of like the genesis story for Arcana. And I think in the 4 years since we started it, the best sort of way of describing Arcana today is the fact that we like to say that we are in the business of abstractions. We've done things like wallet abstraction, gas abstraction, and now doing chain abstraction. But the idea has remained the same. How do you make it effortless for people to use Web3 applications? How do you make it that much more easier for people to build these high quality Web3 applications? And basically realize the original dream of a more decentralized, trustless, middleman, rent-seeking person less future.
I have a lot of questions. I like the intro, but my first one is: you remember your worst, shittiest buy from the ICOs? Come on, you have to remember the worst one. What was the worst one? Come on, be honest. What was the worst one?
Okay, this probably won't. It's not a reflection on the project per se, as much as it was like the opportunity I had to kind of cash in, but did. And this was, it's a very popular auditing firm today called QuantStamp, and they had an ICO and a token, and now looking back, there's absolutely no reason a token for that should exist. And but I had a clear opportunity of probably my first real 100x sort of opportunity with that back in the day, and I like with many other of my investments didn't sell, and I'm just a horrible trader. I just am.
It's an interesting thing you mentioned before, by the way. You said during your intro, you actually, I think, twice said the phrase, I noted it down, not as idealistic future as what we hoped for. And I want to talk a little bit about that before we go on, because I have a very similar opinion personally. So I connect to that a lot. Why do you say that? What do you imply by that? I mean, I think I'm kind of guessing, but I want to hear your opinion, of course.
Yeah, so like back in 2017, I think all the low-hanging fruit when it came to like what can you build with blockchains was stuff around like can I prove provenance of something? Can I use this immutable ledger to be able to like say do something, I don't know, in supply chain, or prove some like someone held something tokenized version of a real world asset, and those sorts of things. But over the years, I've basically seen it basically like degenerate into like just pure casino, and that's a little disheartening. I fully understand the speculative use cases. I fully understand like why DeFi needs to exist, and obviously it's the only real thing in my opinion that's found like very solid product fit. That entire vertical of decentralized finance, and it's a fantastic thing when you see some of the things that it makes possible. But we've really not been able to go beyond that in a tangible way, and that to me is like in some senses like a departure from what I had hoped would happen. But yeah, I mean, we're still on that path. I think there are enough people who still value many of like like I'm not saying I am a cypherpunk, but a lot of those values are very appealing, and very rebellious in nature, very anti-establishment, sort of upsetting the status quo. So that is the status of that got me excited.
You're definitely in the right place to talk about that, because we are like that, and the podcast is a lot like that. A lot of the guests that come on are a lot, but we have, the thing is, I always, as a host, my goal is to try to, even though my opinion is more closer to cypherpunk, even more extreme, I would say, in some places. My idea is to always try to understand not my own opinions, otherwise it wouldn't be a podcast, it'd be a monologue, but the guests that come on the show, regardless of whether they come from the legal side of the industry or any other part of the industry, or Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cosmos, Polkadot, Near, it doesn't matter. But it's interesting that I'm hearing more and more and more and more people such as yourself, regardless of whether they are founders or they I don't know, just evangelists or enthusiasts or VCs even, right? More and more people, at least publicly, they say, hey, I was never a cypherpunk, but I'm kind of starting to understand that we're going in the wrong direction, and it's an interesting point. That, well, why do you think it's happening? Do you think it's because the industry is, like, I mean, okay, the industry doesn't live up to its standards from what we originally thought, but why? Is that a problem? The projects are failing, the founders are failing, the communities are failing, the legals is too much. Like what is the issue in your opinion?
I think it's just that crypto can make a bunch of use cases extremely like hyper financialized very fast and very easily, and that is where sort of like the money really is, and money flows, and wherever money flows is where like markets tend to take you, right? The markets have clearly spoken and saying that, oh, so there isn't money in Web3 gaming yet, there isn't money in Web3 social yet, there isn't money in a bunch of these different sorts of use cases that we had all dreamt up, and were hoping to be able to see. But there is very clearly money in this hyper financializing bunch of different traditional finance use cases, which some dude sitting in his house without understanding potentially the risks can basically rig up in a day, and with the right sort of connections and networks can make it quite successful, and start attracting an audience of a reasonable size. And that, I think, is basically it. Like, if it was easy for people to start up a casino and do it, I think many people would, because the house always makes money, right? So that's sort of like the draw, and people love going to casinos and taking their shot at basically getting hold of some sort of multiplier. So that is what I think has basically happened. Like, this is just markets doing what markets do. It's following where the money is going, and that's perfectly fine. We have to work within that sort of an environment.
It's interesting because, like, looking back, in the industry over the last 12 or so years, let's say 12 years, like, it's obvious to notice that chains and applications that are coming up with ideas such as casinos or 21 or blackjack, right, tend to get a lot more attention than chains that trying to come up with a demo of a product. Let's say, hey, we made in Sharding and L1 here, look at our demo, you can play with it and get a contract. And people are like, what? Where's the casino? Where's the blackjack? So would you say that we were spoiled? Is that what you're trying to say? We got spoiled a little bit as users?
I don't know. I'm not too sure if that's sort of like the word we should use. Everyone here is an adult,
okay,
really, and you're free to make your own decisions.
Of course.
You can live in Las Vegas and never walk into a single casino, and that's perfectly your choice, right? So I think it's just a function of free markets and money flowing in a certain direction, and then people trying to optimize for where that's flowing and aligning with those sorts of
Understood. I wasn't trying to put words into your mouth. It was just, trying to get to the bottom of what you think. You mentioned building apps, and just before we recorded today, like maybe 2 hours before we started to record, like we are also builders. We also build apps, and I sent to my work chat. It was a tweet I saw from Andrej Karpathy, from the ex Tesla AI guy, and he made a tweet. I don't know if it was today or yesterday, but I saw it today, about the difficulty of building apps, not Web3 apps. And then he started to write, here is all the points, and I sent it like as a kind of as a laugh, not laugh, but like, serious note, like not serious, not laugh. I don't know, just a thing to my team, to have a look at something I'm interested in. And I added a comment on that. And you didn't even start with Web3 apps yet. And here you are coming to say exactly the same thing, right? So let's start from the beginning. Let's start with an easy question. Is a Web3 stack even possible in your opinion? Like pure Web3 stack, is it even possible? Is that even a thing, or is that just a buzzword?
A pure Web3 stack today, I don't think anyone has. It is possible. Maybe if you are building like a very simplified, say, DEX, maybe on chain model. That is, and as long as it's on some high performance blockchain, I think that's perfectly feasible to do something like that. But most serious apps have some Web2 component that they need to sort of rely on to make it work one way or another, right? So, I mean, even if you see like every RPC probably lives on AWS or some centralized.
Not every.
Most like the ones that are popular and used more often than not. But yeah, I don't have a personal grouse with that. I don't think everything needs to be pure Web3. I think it's perfectly okay to kind of, for a developer to walk in and say, hey, I love these parts about what Web3 has to offer, and I really want the dependability and reliance of what these parts of Web2 that exist and have existed and are tried and tested and just work. And that's perfectly fine. And I think you should be able to be free enough to make that call.
I mean, what you guys are building, which, and I don't mean necessarily, I mean, of course, feel free to talk about, I would like you to talk about Arcana Network, but I meant chain abstraction in general as a generalization. I guess it's a step towards simplifying building apps, right? In one, can I say that? Is that okay? So can you talk about how is what you guys are building? Because there has been, I always like to play, I believe, devil's advocate, right? And I always like to look at, there was recently the case with abstract chain, right, which had a lot of very promising product, and unfortunately got hacked very quickly. There is, of course, the success case of Celestia. I'm sorry that I'm advertising here projects, but I'm not really. But with Celestia did make a success case with what they do, and at least for now, let's see what happens in the future. How are you guys entering into that market, and how is what you're doing helping people to lower the the difficulty in building an app?
Yeah, so I think this all starts with like the this modular thesis that Ethereum has, and the general like burst of like chains in general that we are seeing nowadays, not just layer twos. But if you look at what's happening, Ethereum very clearly said execution needs to happen on a separate layer, and lo and behold, you have like 40, 50 L2s that exist today, maybe more by now, and they all pretty much do very similar things, but they all exist. Some of them don't exist anymore, and many of them now allow people to build their own chains on top of them. These could be layer threes, or they could be independent chains, like Arbitrum has Arbitrum Orbit, OP has super chains, ZK has elastic chains, and then you have the likes of Celestia who say that you can build your own chain using like a roll-up as service stack with Celestia for DA, and then of course you have Avalanche with their subnets and so on and so forth. Right? You even see Solana guys now talk about what's it called, extensions. If I'm not wrong. And so we are well and truly entering like this multi-chain future. This is almost gotten cemented to a point where any app that's worth its like is worth its salt is going to perhaps launch its own chain, because they're not going to sit and share block space with other people. They're not going to share throughput with other people. And people like Uniswap have demonstrated that this is probably the way to go. Things like Hyperliquid have clearly demonstrated that this is probably the way to go. And that is, I think, just great for the ecosystem in general. Because I remember back in the day, and it happens even now, is that when I wanted to kind of choose where to build whatever it is that we were building, the choice was hard. I mean, it's not like it's in Web2 where I have to say, oh, okay, so this is what I'm trying to build. This is the stack. And probably, DigitalOcean is the best place for me to kind of build, or AWS is. And this is purely based on, business requirements translated to technological requirements, translated to what should be my infra requirements, right? But in Web3, there's these weird, like, strategic calls that you have to make, and you have to time them in terms of saying, hey, you know what, ZK Sync is going to launch, and so probably a lot of liquidity will come there, or Monad is going to launch now, we should build on Monad, when we were building on, Arbitrum 3 months ago, and it was perfectly fine. And that is just a horrible place. I think it just fosters the wrong sort of culture when it comes to builders. And you're seeing this. Right? You're seeing people just grant farming. You're seeing people whose roadmap is basically saying, I will build on Arbitrum today, Monad tomorrow, Mega ETH then, and then the next chain, and then the next chain. And that's basically it. Right? So this sort of like situation is from a developer's perspective, and for the developer ecosystem, just bad. You should be making choices purely based on business requirements, translating to technological requirements, translating to what you need, where you want to build. Right? If you need something extremely high throughput that really doesn't worry so much about decentralization or even like 99.4959 uptime, then we probably just go to and build on Solana, right? But if you want the security of something like an Ethereum, then build in that ecosystem and use Ethereum as your DA. Don't use Celestia or anyone else. But if none of that matters to you, then maybe just build an Arbitrum Orbit chain or like a ZK Sync chain and use Avail for your data availability, and that's perfectly fine. So now, I think that's where we are moving towards, because now I have optionality. But the problem again still is, where is the liquidity? Where are the users? And this is born out of the fact that these chains, which are probably like the highest up in like the pyramid when it comes to like value and value generation. So at least so far, and these are the ones that would attract the liquidity, attract the users through basically incentive programs, right? Saying, come try out our testnet and get, XYZ tokens. And that then is what is used as gunpowder to start attracting builders. And these builders will be like, hey, yeah, I'll build with you this week. But next week I'll build with someone else who's doing the same thing. And that sort of whole paradigm needs to get flipped on its head. And how it ought to work is like how it works in Web2 is where I'm looking for a solution to my problem. An app is out there that provides me that solution to my existing problem. And I just use apps. And where that app is should be largely irrelevant to me. I should probably know where that app is built just to make sure it's not on some obscure long tail chain, so that I can risk assess. Like if I'm going to be using a DeFi app, then I need to know that, where is my money going to be, and is it going to be in a place where, it's going to be hard to be getting it out in case of like a. So to make this possible, to make this whole situation possible where people are just using apps and things like that, we needed a way for essentially users not really caring about where their assets are or where they need to spend them, and just being able to spend them, right? We needed a way, like I like to use like this example sometimes, is like, imagine if you had to speak to your friends, let's say 5 of your friends, but for each one you need to pick up a different phone, or you need to switch sims because, oh, you can't use this sim to call your this friend in this country. Oh, then you need to use switch sims again to call someone else, right? Yeah, that's just absurd, but that's what I have to do today. I have to switch wallets. I need to have 4 or 5 of them, and then I need to kind of, make sure I have money on each of these chains to be able to use them. And that is that's no way in which we will ever get to any modicum of like of adoption. So we needed to kind of figure out a way around this, and that's how like chain abstraction journey began. And I know this is quite a bit of like context, but I just wanted to set it in order to be able to kind of speak about maybe some of the more detailed, nuanced stuff.
I'm gonna go devil's advocate then straight away because if the first question that arises to mind, if I would have been outside the industry, if I'm somebody who I am actually building a cross-chain product, and I know exactly what you're talking about. It's not the first time I'm doing it, so I understand very well what you talk about. But I have to go from a perspective of, let's think of what when somebody hears, okay, so I'm going to make a one entry point for all blockchains, but doesn't that go back in decentralization? Doesn't that kind of say to us, if we are, I mean, I don't know today, but there could be an adversary, or there could be an entity or a player that, okay, if they are building a technology that allows a single entry point, doesn't that weaken the decentralization and centralization spectrum?
Technically, what you're saying is correct, but I don't know how it applies here. So let me try and describe how I'm thinking about it, right? Let's say you're building a cross-chain app today, and your app does not need to be cross-chain to deliver its features. Like, you're not building cross-chain because you want some features of Solana, or you want some features of Aptos, and you want some features of this. You're building it because you're basically, in more often than not, trying to find where liquidity is, where users are, in order to kind of, be successful. And that is something that we want to kind of put a stop to and say, pick the best place for you to build your app in terms of the features that you want to deliver today and further down in your roadmap. And you should be able to, on the back of making that choice, not be worried that, oh, will users be able to come and spend on my chain? So as an example, let's take like, for example, say Fuel. Fuel is an L2, but it's built on the Fuel VM. It's quite hard to build on Fuel, but once you get the hang of it, it's fantastic because you can do so much more, and it promises hundreds of thousands of TPS, yada yada. But there is just the one canonical bridge to Fuel. So if I had to do anything, build an app on Fuel and then get users to spend, let's say I'm building some sort of Fuel because it's the perfect place for me in terms of what I need. But I'm now reliant on people either procuring assets that need to be spent on my app to go through like the bridging process on the canonical bridge, which is going to take its own sweet time, or procure assets on a centralized exchange, perhaps, to be able to kind of do this. And that is simply not going to happen. Like, we've seen this from the beginning of when Web3 launched, is that people are not going to go buy your token to use you unless you're super valuable, unless you're like you have a Solana moment of your own. And that is what we want to kind of do away with. We want for you to be able to go make that choice of building on fuel. But and if let's say someone needs to spend fuel, USDC fuel, basically USDC that is on fuel, natively on fuel on your app, they should be able to like pool in the USDC that they have across, say, Arbitrum, OP, Base, and spend it almost instantly without needing to bridge, right? No context switch for the user, and I am able to spend. I just have money, and I'm able to spend it on this app, and I don't have to worry about going to a bridge, moving all these assets, and then using. This basically results in like net positive uh, like spending by users on your app, and now you're only going to be reliant on what your app promises to deliver in terms of solving.
It's I understand the explanation. I'm still with the same. I still want to dig a little bit about the same argument, because in one way we are trading, like superpowers for a single failure point, right? Because we're saying, okay, now I gain superpowers to interact with every chain, but now I have one single point of failure. How do we maximize the efficiency of that point of failure, or how do we spread the what's the right word here, the responsibility of that point of failure back to make it, even though I understand, of course, it would make much more sense if everybody had the superpower to interact with, one app. I mean, you gave an example of Sims before, and I mean, not Sims the game, Sims as in eSIMs, right? And I just remembered, that, well, I actually do have friends like that. I do have friends that go, I can only talk on Signal, you have to text me from whatever, man, and then burn your phone. So, but sometimes it's kind of fun, of course, talking to them, but sometimes it's annoying. But no, but seriously, so how do we either decrease the responsibility of such points of power, or how do we spread it out? I don't know the right question here, because of course this is theoretical talk.
Yeah. I think I get what you're saying now, but here's the thing, right? So if let's say I decided to build on fuel is a decentralized blockchain. If we are going to say a decentralized blockchain is a single point of failure, then we have failed as an industry in general, right? If I have to build on multiple blockchains to avoid failure, then there's a much bigger problem, right? This is something that I think I think it forms the crux of what you're asking. So I think as a builder, I need to kind of take into account, is this chain going to survive? Like I wouldn't be saying this about perhaps like an Ethereum, or even maybe like a Base or an Arbitrum or a Solana or an Aptos today. And I choose to build on whatever ecosystem because my dev team is on the Move stack, so I'll build on Aptos. Or and there is enough liquidity that is there that I'm going to get enough support from the foundation and the ecosystem that they've built there. So these are my decision-making points, and based on that, I'm going to build here. But that shouldn't stop someone who has assets on Base to be able to interact with my app on Move, because that user's problem may be getting solved by this, right? So these little echo chambers that we formed with these ecosystems of different L1s is what we need to kind of basically blur the lines between them, build the pipes that allow users to freely flow. I mean, this is what the internet does, right? I can sit in India and buy something of Alibaba, but I don't need Chinese yuan or a Chinese debit card or a credit card to be able to buy it. I can just go to the internet, go to Alibaba, and basically order whatever I want, pay in my native currency, and it just works.
I would see that. I don't want to dig it too much, of course, because your answer actually explains it perfectly. Well, I would say that your example is more like Google, because and then I mean, an explorer, right? In terms of the internet was very spread out until explorers started to put it all kind of together for the end user. But now we know that Google is a fucking evil piece of shit. We know it today, right? But I mean, no, they're smart. They're smart. There's no doubt that the guy's a genius. To understand
Yeah,
what they
yeah, yeah.
did 25 years ago, they had to get it right. They had to get it right. And but we know that today we want kind of freedom from Google, right? Even though they gave us that abstraction, like so, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point, but the again, the thing is here today is that we have, as a builder today, I have the choice of building on so many more stacks than I did before, and even compared to like Web2, I would say like I can build on this blockchain because it gives me that edge, or give this blockchain because it allows me to build in this language, and so many options, right? And so that I think it has not been stripped away, and that optionality exists, and that I think is what people ought to leverage and make the choice with for the right reasons, and then thereafter not be like essentially uh, you know, in a sense, held back because there is no liquidity here or there are no users here. I should be able to like do Web2 marketing. I should be able to do ads, attract users, and they should be able to come and spend whatever they have because I'm solving a legitimate problem, and this is the best place for me to build in order to deliver this solution.
I actually agree with probably 90 to 95% of what you say. Like I said, it's a moral question of trying to, kind of balance out of. It's like the whole thing, with blockchains. And I'm gonna try to move topic, of course, a little bit. I have a couple of more questions for you about Arcana that I do want to dig, but just to kind of, to smoothly go off from here, I would say that it's kind of the question of, is blockchain a P2P technology, or is it a decentralized man in the middle? And for me, blockchain has always been a decentralized man in the middle. P2P is when me and you interact directly and there's no blockchain in the middle of us. But as humans, I don't think we're capable of that. I don't think that as human beings, at least today in our society, we are definitely not, we don't trust each other at all, like to be able to create that. But okay, but I want to ask you something that builds on what you say, like it's, feel free of course to comment more to this, but still I'm gonna ask you something that builds up for me on that. I know that you guys are big on security and on privacy, and you guys had a I'm sorry, it's your own name, so I'm not sure if I'm saying it. ADKG launch, right? Which is basically like with a secret, right? Which is like several networks done in the past, like Union, like Zcash, and it's cool. So it's big respect for that. I want to ask you a question that builds on top of that. Again, feel free to talk about it as well, but still, we talk about chain abstraction right now, and we talk about builders, and we talk about security, and we talk about a lot of things. One of the biggest things that springs to mind that when I hear such a big technology as Arcana that is trying to bring so many things together, again, as a builder and as an infrastructure provider, binaries. There is like one big problem today, right? That like all builders have to trust where their binaries come from, and they're like, kind of have to trust that. Like, how is, if in any way at all, the way that what Arcana is building in terms of the chain abstraction, can it help to solve that? Because for me, that is like the golden, the golden thing of the development, right? We cannot make sure that the information is real today. We basically have to trust the whoever puts the binary out there, that hey, that binary is okay, and we run it. And it's kind of like a dodgy thing. But I'm thinking, because Arcana does chain abstraction, maybe it's actually gonna help with that, or am I wrong here in that thinking?
Yeah, I mean, if you really like start connecting the dots with what we built, and if you draw a dot really far away to what you are talking about, I think you can join those dots. But it's really hard for us to kind of
too much.
Yeah, yeah.
I
No,
went too far.
it's
Okay.
it's definitely like feasible if you, but I mean, it's going to be a lot of mental masturbation on my part to kind of connect those dots really at this point. But
I can understand.
but yeah, I mean, like I think many of the things that you mentioned are core to what how we see things. But I think the one point that I really do want to make is that over the years we've learned to become far more pragmatic, uh, and we are probably living in an age where we are learning that users care very little about the things we think they care about or we want them to care about, and they are basically showing this through their actions, through their through the way they kind of interact with uh, uh, applications in the space and with their money. And this, I think, is like a very important aspect that if we don't come to terms to or terms with that, the technology simply is not there for users to uh, care enough about these sorts of things. Um, and till we get to the point that like it can just become part of like a user's natural flow, that introducing these hard steps is only going to result in churn and lower adoption. And that is something that we, as like, for all our idealism at Arcana, we still have a business to run. And that is something that we've basically said and submitted to market forces and said, if this is what the market's saying, then that's the way we are going to go. And it's going to be really hard to go against the grain because these are extremely strong forces. And until and unless there is like full support from whole ecosystem to push in that direction, then you will always have outliers who come out and say, "Oh, meme coins are actually not bad for anyone. It's fantastic. You should go and invest in them." And we see the fallout of that. And then we see chains that promote these sorts of coins, and we make it like normal to be able to accept that these sorts of things exist. So today, that's the level of practicality that we're living in. So there have, of course, everyone is free to draw their lines and say, this is my limit, but not drawing the line is dangerous for you as a business. So you should learn to accept some of that.
I guess my next big question, because it is a big topic, so I think we're gonna have a few things to discuss here. But it relates directly to what you say now. You mentioned memes. I'm gonna start from there, and we mentioned use cases, finances, and memes, and I think by now it's kind of hard to deny that memes are a use case of crypto, like whether we like it or not. It's proven to be a very successful use case, and one thing they I think teaching crypto to do is to build communities without with crazy belief, right? Like with the religion type belief of like, hey, blind and just follow the leader, well, kind of thing. But I wanna ask you again. Your guys are building with chain abstraction, something that requires connecting different communities, especially, and apart from that, developers are the type of communities that they need to eat, and they eat food that costs money. So another thing in crypto, like on the other hand, and I'm gonna come to a question, but like on the other hand, I want to first make like the case for it. On the other hand, you have like, yeah, I mean, I said memes, but we are still living, I would say, in a individual silo world. I still would say so. I still maybe ecosystem. We go closer to ecosystems. We're much closer to full-on ecosystems like the Ethereum, the Cosmos, the Polkadot, whatever. But still, it's still not a cross-chain system. So people are apart from meme tokens, people catch to their bugs like, I don't know, like crazy. Oh my God, like Ethereum is going to kill everybody, or Solana, or I don't care, or Near, or whatever. So how on earth are you combining all this and putting all this together? How are you building a cross-chain community while maintaining, like you said, logic as a business, and being able to feed the developers that come, whether it's internal or external, and at the same time build a community that, at least maybe, I'm not going to say completely forgot about tribalism, but at least, yeah, I think you understand what I'm trying to ask. I know, I'm sorry for but yeah.
Yeah, I think tribalism does exist, and some of it, some people have done a fantastic job of like fostering it. Some of it, some people have not been able to do a good job. Some other people have been capable to the point of weaponizing the tribalism that they've sort of built, and 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 basically using it in action. And um, I but I have a like very strong feeling that eventually all of this sort of like falls 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 apart in a sense. Uh, and I mean, you'll have fans of things, and I mean, we just have to look at the traditional finance world, right? You have stock markets. I buy a stock because it's going to give me a return, and I probably become a fan of this company, this publicly traded company, and like I'll buy. Like I can be a huge fan of Apple, but I don't have to buy their stock, or I could have bought their stock and use the Samsung phone, and that's perfectly normal. And that's probably, if you start to like figure out what is happening, you will see that it's not that, oh, I have an Apple phone, I have to buy Apple stock. I have Apple stock, so I should use an iPhone. That need not happen, and that in most cases, I think that's the way we are going to go eventually in crypto as well. And I think the spark for this will be the fact that people will now start using apps instead of using chains. And the fact that an app is on a particular chain, it becomes like one step in my due diligence process of whether I should use this app. Like back in the day, you seem like someone who will probably remember this or know of this. But when e-commerce sites or just websites in general that were solving different problems started to come up and become like a big thing, I remember like scrolling to the footer of the site and checking if it is McAfee secured or very sign certified, right? And so that's all I need to that was my trust marker, and I would say, okay, I can use this. And then now those things don't exist, because the idea is that this app which is being used, they're like social proof and social markers, and there are reviews of all of these sorts of things, and people use that to determine if they should use it. Are my friends using it? 10,000 other people using it? What are the complaints? And then I decided to use it. And I think that's the direction that we'll go down. And people will just build apps on Solana because they want an extremely fast blockchain. People will build apps on Ethereum because they want like the security that Ethereum validators are able to supply in a decentralized manner. And that's basically it. And people will start interacting with apps, and basically this tribalism will shift to like apps and what they have to offer, which is going to be so much more healthier in terms of like the innovation that is needed. Like, and if we can do this, then it's healthier, because then you have genuine revenue streams flowing all the way upstream to these chains, who can then innovate on their own, and people can then find gaps and say, I'm going to build something that fills this gap, instead of building just yet another L2 that is no different from the 40 that exists.
How do you promote, or if because we kind of mentioned privacy and data, but we didn't really go to talking about it. How do you promote amongst the community, especially like you mentioned validators, and you mentioned AWS a couple of times and RPCs in AWS? How do you guys promote decentralization in this case? How do you, I mean, while maintaining security, of course, and efficiency as a network? How do you? Are you at that stage, or are you guys still like? I don't know. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So we are currently on testnet, and so in testnet we basically run. I won't go into the details of our architecture. I think that's a whole other conversation. But essentially, we have a Cosmos-based chain that whose job is to work like a very traditional blockchain, which is as a state machine, as an immutable, undisputable ledger, which is manned by a bunch of validators. Right. So as we come closer to mainnet, the idea is to get these validators on board who are able to, and on this Cosmos chain, we are able to kind of talk to all these other chains through different mechanisms and basically bring their data on chain. And for us to know what is the state of affairs when it comes to a user holding funds on a bunch of different chains and wanting to spend it on another chain, and was that user successful in being able to use their assets on chains ABC to spend it on chain D, and who supplied the funds to this user to be able to kind of do this and basically settle back and things like that. And we most definitely feel like we have made design choices in order to kind of alleviate a lot of like trust assumptions that a user or a developer who's building with us would have to make. A lot of the risk that you would typically associate with anything cross-chain is now moved upstream to an actor called a solver, who basically assumes the risk and fronts a liquidity to a user. So the way it works is basically a user supplies an intent to say that, I have funds on ABC, but I want to be able to spend on D, on this app on chain D, and I'm willing to use these funds on ABC. And we're like, okay, so here we'll collect your funds on ABC. That sort of resource locks it. Now you can't double spend it. So you made this commitment to obviously those funds being collected. And then a solver basically says, hey, Arcana, did this collection happen? And we're like, yes, thumbs up. This did happen. And then it fronts the liquidity to the user. And at some point, we basically settle back with the solver. And now, because of this system, the user is basically having their funds collected into like smart contracts, which is completely verifiable, and it's on chains that the user has funds on. So they obviously trust those chains already. And so it's not an issue there. Now the solvers are basically assuming the risk. They're off-chain actors, and they're saying, okay, I will trust that Arcana will give me the money, and I will collect a fee for basically providing the user this convenience of being able to spend funds on this place where they want to spend now. And basically they're pricing the risk. And now we've basically moved all risk upstream, and there are no new trust assumptions for the user. And the only place where we need to kind of make sure we are decentralized and we are trustless to a very large extent is that state machine that I spoke of, which is going to basically process the settlement solvers. Because if we don't do that, then we basically cheated someone out of the money that is owed to them, because they've fronted liquidity for someone else. Right. So that is essentially the system that we're building, and it is an open system. It's a public system. Privacy does not play a major role here, but at the same time, we're dabbling with a few things to figure out, can we do private cross-chain like payments and transfers in this sort of system, and that is something that we look to do. But largely, we've said users, you can use this, no trouble for you. Solvers, it's a much smaller set of people. These are your trust assumptions, and this is what you'll have to deal with. But you can, of course, charge a fee for all this sort of like trusting and fronting that you have to do.
Mayur, I'm gonna jump from here into the Blitz. It's 3 questions to take us out of the blockchain conversation, to land us down. Now they're going to be weird, so prepare. They have nothing to do with blockchain, but it's a typical thing I do. We talk blockchain, and then you don't have to answer Blitz. I call it the Blitz, but take your time to think, of course. So, first one, Mayur, can you please give me either a song or a movie or a book that has a positive influence on your work?
Yeah, I think I'm going to say I think my favorite movie. It's Shawshank Redemption. I think it's yeah, it's very apt for the times that we are in right now. We've come through like massive bear and this huge promise of like a massive bull, but it has not happened, and you're having to come through it. But eventually, you get through it, right? Just to sheer perseverance and things like that. So I think for sure that one.
Second one, can you please share something motivational that you can, of course, share that helps Mayur to wake up every morning, to get out of bed, to keep on building chain abstraction, keep on looking for a solution, keep on, hoping for a better decentralized future, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I don't know if this is motivational for others, but personally for me, I've felt like what we are doing here is basically, for me, it's my life's work. I don't think I will do another thing after this. I simply do not, and that's sort of like, I think, puts very positive constraints for me every day when I wake up and I think about what I need to do. This is not like, oh shit, there's nowhere to go from here. I mean, there are 100 places to go from here, but I wake up and I think, okay, so this is what I need to make work because this is that important to me. And because I treated that like that, it's very easy to kind of, take the lows with the highs.
It reminds me of something smart. I think it was Brian from Chorus One, if I'm not mistaken, who said it on my show, at least. But a lot of people said it, and it's basically what you're saying. Found a lot of the time when we workers, they tend to hired workers to complain more because they have bad salary or bad conditions. What they tend to forget about is that a founder cannot just get up and leave. A founder, when he's there, it's his life's work. If he gets up and leaves, in bracket, I'm doing quotations here, of course, nobody can see it, but if he gets up and leaves, it's a whole different case. It's a matter of, other people's livelihood. It's a matter of 10 or 20 sometimes years, or sometimes more years of work. And so I totally understand. Last one, it's a bit of a weird one. Dead or alive, real or made up, cartoon character, book author, family member, doesn't matter, movie character, a personage who, or persona, could be a real persona, who is not a guru for you, because I don't personally believe in them, but when you stuck with work and you're like, fuck, this is not, I'm tired of this, I'm really tired, I don't want to do anymore, you kind of think of them, of that person, or made up or not, and it helps you a little bit to progress.
I'm a huge anime fan, and it can be very cringy and very stereotypical, but a lot of this like shonen anime with these shonen characters, where I just love how it's like this. It's just pure storytelling at a very basic level. There is a hero. He's going to undergo trauma and pain, but he's going to overcome for sure and eventually win. Right. So there are a bunch of anime characters that, like, I sort of, I don't explicitly like think about per se, but or draw direct inspiration, but it's really cool and it's very nice. You know exactly what's going to happen in most of these cases, right? But yeah, I still like to think about some of those.
I think it makes perfect sense what you're saying. So I totally understand. To me, it does. I'm sure. I had a lot of people actually who I think try to speak of that. The communication, I guess, like that is there something that helps them to progress in a way that I guess you can connect to that. Mayur, I want to thank you very, very, very much for your time, for your answers. This is going to be a goodbye just for the listeners. Please don't gap just yet. For everybody else who tuned in, thank you and see you next week. Bye, Mayur.
Bye-bye. Thanks, man.
This content was created by the Citizen Web3 Validator. If you enjoyed it, please support us by delegating on citizenweb3.com/staking and help us create more educational content.